of SIP Talks, designed for those curious about the fast paced world of strategy, problem solving, and structured thinking.
Breaking into consulting requires a very different approach, one that blends business awareness with analytical rigor. Today's speaker has done just that, landing an internship at one of the top global consulting firms. Speaker Devansh, we are excited to hear from Devansh, who secured an internship at BCG, one of the most prestigious names in management consulting. Over to you, Devansh.
Hi everybody. Just if someone can confirm if I'm audible.
Yes, you are audible.
Yes, you are audible.
Okay, perfect. Let's start. So, hello everyone. A little introduction about me. Hi, I'm Devansh. I just completed my third year. I'm a single degree EC student, and I would be joining BCG as a summer intern this summer. Okay, so a little bit about consulting for those of you who have no idea about what it is and just think of it as a fancy term. So basically, what you do as a consultant would be to solve business problems of the companies. Maybe they're experiencing a decline in profits since last 6 months, or maybe they want to enter a new market, let's say, or they want you to conduct a due diligence on one of the companies they want to acquire or merger. Basically, any sort of business problems. So they'll hire external parties such as you as a consultant who do the job for them. Okay. So now the thing is, there's not a specific path or roadmap as per se that you can follow and get into consulting or management consulting, strategy consulting, or any role for that sort of. Because in CS you have very old saying that DSA kar lo or practice these problems, whatever. But there's no specific path, but there are certain guidelines which you can follow, which you can maybe use to your advantage and get yourself into such role. So I'll just highlight the process of what the selection process looks like, and then we can move on to what each of the process or step demands. So the ideal flow of selection would be that first round would be your resume shortlisting. In my case, BCG came for on-campus SIB drive, and they shortlisted 5 people, and that is more than half of the job already done if your resume is shortlisted. And then the second round would be case interviews, which can happen in multiple rounds. In my case, it was 2 rounds, but I know some people who were asked for 3 or 4 rounds as well. Since I was just I was applying for the position of intern, my interview process was wrapped in 2 case interviews. We'll get into the depth of that, but let's first say that what you can do or what do the recruiters ideally look when you say they scan your profile or your resume. So a little heartbreak for some of you, but a CGPA of at least 8 is required. So I'm not asking for, let's say, 9.5, although that is considered one of the very good spikes, and then that can get you a very direct shortlist. But you need to get at least 8, 8.2, 8.3. Let's say the benchmark of 8 would be a good figure to have if you are thinking about applying to one of the top consulting firms. That is McKinsey, Bain, or BCG. So BCG came for on-campus SIP, and McKinsey had off-campus targeted placement internship drive for our campus. But both of them had this common that they would only shortlist people at least who had a CGPA of 8 and above. And there's a very common myth that if you want to go into these consulting internships, you need to have a consulting background, or you need to have some projects done in this domain specifically. That is very untrue. The only thing which they would look at while screening your profile would be that if you can get the work done, does not necessarily mean that it needs to be in the consulting domain only. If you can showcase them that you have done the work, maybe you did an internship where you delivered some impactful results, does not necessarily be in consulting domain. Or if you have done a project and it has some real life impact, or let's say if you held a position of responsibility, again specifying, do not need to be in consulting domain. Any work you have done which has an impactful result would be considered a good spike. So just go and get active in any of the clubs or departments you're in. So maybe it could be VGCC or 180DC or WSC or SOFI, any of the clubs which you feel is according to your liking. Just go, and get the work done. It could also be that you did an SOP under a professor and you published a research paper. Anything which demonstrates that you can get the work done would be considered ideal or good for them. So this was the step one, that you can get your resume shortlisted in this way. Any work, just have impactful results, and that should be good to go. And the second would be the interview round. So as I mentioned in the starting, that there are certain type of business problems that you would solve as a consultant, and they want to just check a little if you can do that in a structured manner or not. So typical uh, case interviews would probably be consisting of these type of cases, which would be profitability, such as XYZ company had a 30% decline in profitability in the last 3 months. Analyze why. And then you go into series of back and forth questions and answers and everything. And after a 20-25 minute discussion or an interview, you reach to a solution. And these are some of the cases. In my interviews, I was first asked a profitability case, and then the second one was a market entry and a guesstimate combined. But some of the people I know were also asked some unconventional cases and other things. But for the second round, at least you need not worry about it as per se right now, because once they shortlist your resume, they'll give you an ample amount of time to prepare for these case studies. In my case, once my resume was shortlisted, they assigned me a buddy. Buddy is someone who's already working in the firm and is from your college, who helps you in this whole process of case study prep. So they assigned me two buddies actually. One was a little senior, and so he couldn't give that much of a time, but still they assigned two buddies for you to help you prepare for the cases. And they give you around 20 days ka time period so that you can at least get to the world of case prep if you're not someone from consulting background. That is why I wanted to stress a little that you need not think ki I'm not a part of a consulting club. I have not done any projects as per se. So I may not be considered a good or ideal candidate for them. Okay, so this was a little about what the selection process looks like and what consulting is. I know this was a little vague because as I mentioned, there's not a very specific path which you can follow. But I'm open to discussions. If you guys have any questions, we could address them and we can have a healthy chat. If someone wants to write in the chat or maybe turn up their mic, that is fine with me.
Like the common worry of most of the people are that their CGPA is not 9 plus or they do not have big PORs. So how much that stuff matters in consulting as a career option?
Okay, so you need not have a 9 plus CGPA, but at least I'd recommend if you have around 5 and 5 or let's say in the 6 range, then it might be a little difficult for you to get your resume shortlisted because these companies give a lot of importance to academic rigor. So at least around at 7.5 should be a good benchmark, but in an ideal world, 8 plus is a good CGPA. And personally, I also did not take up any POR, so I'll be a little biased that PORs don't matter that much. But again, the other four people who were shortlisted along with me, all four of them had PORs. So take it with a pinch of salt if I say that PORs don't matter that much. But yes, if you do not have a lot of significant other things, so POR would be a good factor for you to consider, get your profile considered. Uh, I don't think they actually look at your LinkedIn profiles as per se. Your resume is the one you make on Superset and apply through Superset only, and that would be the only thing which they'll look at. And even in your case interviews, they'll just ask you about what is written in your resume. They won't go externally and look for your profile on LinkedIn or other sources. So not really for SIP, but yes, just in case if you're trying to get an off-campus internship, if you're in second year or maybe a dual IT and have SIPs next year, so that way you could maybe stack up your LinkedIn. But I would say that don't put up certifications just for the sake of it. But just to answer your question again, for SIPs, they don't look at your LinkedIn profiles, most of them at least. So doesn't matter if you do or don't.
That was incredibly insightful. Thank you. We will hold the Q&A session for the consulting post the discussion on electronics. Till then, you are free to ask doubts on the chat.
Let us now switch to electronics track of SIP Talks, a space dedicated to exploring opportunities in core engineering fields like analog or digital design, VLSI, and embedded systems.
Today, you all will hear from four of our seniors who have carved their path into top companies like Texas Instruments and Nvidia. Each speaker will give you a blend behind the scene, looking into their preparation, technical focus, and how they crack these highly selective roles. First up is Ashmita Mukherjee, who secured an analog design internship at Texas Instruments. Over to you, Ashmita.
Okay, so just a minute. Mm, can you view my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Hi guys, I'm Asmita and I work as an analog intern in TI. So I will try to give you some insights about what courses you have to prepare, how to build your resume, how important exactly are SOPs and your CG, and my personal SIP experience from 1 week that I was there in the company. So before I start with what courses you need to prepare, I would like to kind of give an introduction of how the entire selection process was. So you basically have two rounds. The first is the online assessment, and the second is the interview if you get shortlisted from the online assessment. So the OA or the online assessment was similar to the quizzes that you give, and it has two parts. So the first part is an aptitude section, and then you have the core analog section. So if the analog section compared to all the quizzes, compres, and midterms that you have been giving so far, was extremely easy. It is very basic and it's completely formula based. You do not necessarily have to have a very rigorous preparation for that. As long as you remember basic formulas from all your electronics courses that you've studied so far, that is enough. What really matters in your OA is the aptitude section. So I think there were 30 questions in 30 minutes. And most people tend to take aptitude lightly, but the main issue with aptitude is that really require a lot of speed to answer all questions accurately. You will be given small case studies and simple numeric aptitude questions and logical reasoning based questions. And you need to be very fast with them in order to complete them in the given amount of time. So I suggest that more than focusing on your prep for analog questions for the OA, you need to focus on your aptitude section because the analog section is purely formula based. You don't need to do any rigorous preparation for that. And the interview is actually very different as compared to the OA. So while your OA is completely formula based, the interview is more detailed and it focuses more on your concepts on the various topics. So, for example, just to give a clear distinction between the two, so in your OA, if you're asked a question about RLC circuits, you'll mostly be asked a question about finding the current or voltage across a particular element in the circuit. However, in your interview, if the same question is asked, you will be asked to analyze how the current exactly flows and what is the graphical representation of the same. And you will be asked to approach it in a more intuitive way, not in a mathematical way. So that is the major difference between the interview and the OA. I suggest that you prepare for the interview from before only, because the gap between your OA and your interview is actually, I think, only 24 hours. You would not get a lot of time to prepare for your interview if you get shortlisted and then you start your preparation from scratch. So I suggest that you do both of them parallelly. The courses that you really need to focus on, I think the most important course is ES. If you have an in-depth understanding of each and every topic covered in ES, that is almost sufficient for your entire preparation, because almost 70% of the questions that are asked are from ES only. And in ES also, the most important topic is RLC circuits. So you need to have a very in-depth understanding of how capacitors get charged and discharged, how inductors get charged and discharged, and how the entire circuit functions. If you give an input, how does the output look across the elements, all of that. In ED, you don't need to focus a lot on the pre-midsem portions, which deals with the physics part of it, but you need to focus on the devices like MOSFETs, BJTs, PN junctions. BJTs are also equally important, although we don't give a lot of importance in the courses that we have studied so far in college. But I suggest that you look through how BJTs function as well, because they do ask questions. MUI, I'm assuming you don't need to revise because you've just done it. And also from MUI, they ask very basic questions. You just need to know how MOSFETs functions and how a channel is formed and how electrons move, all of that. You don't essentially need to know a lot about frequency responses and types of the different circuits and how each circuit functions. You don't need to go into details of that. You just need to know an overview of that. Apart from that, many people have doubts as to whether SAS, consensus, and subjects like that are important. Well, from my personal experience, it is not important. You can just skip all the subjects. For analog, mostly you just need to focus on these particular subjects. If you have extra time, you can always go through Laplace transforms and other stuff, but that is not essentially required and it hasn't been asked in the last few years. OPAMs are slightly important, but you don't need to go into the details of it. You just need to know how to solve basic op-amp circuits, which are mostly based on nodal and mesh analysis. So you don't need to put in a lot of time for that as well. I suggest that in analog per se, instead of focusing on additional topics, just get your basics cleared and just do the topics that you've already done in a more detailed manner. So that will help. So here I've attached like basic materials that you can go through. I think one of those links has like questions that the companies have already previously asked. And one thing about TI is that they do repeat questions. So if you go through some of the mock interviews that have happened in the past, it's on YouTube. So if you go through that, that will really help and it will give you an idea of the difficulty level of the question, the type of questions which have been asked. Another important thing is resume building. So, one of the most important things about your resume is to have relevant projects, relevant electronics projects if you're applying for an electronics role, because that kind of gives an idea to the interviewers about how much you've already worked in this domain and how much external knowledge you have apart from your coursework. But it is obviously not like you don't have to be disheartened if you don't have an analog project, and if you want to apply for an analog role, you can still do certain courses which are available online, do projects which are available online in these 2 months, and you can still put that on your resume, and that is good enough. Because for me, I had formally started working on my SOP in 3-1 itself, but over the summers, I just did some informal research on the same topics, and I looked through many IEEE papers and stuff. I did not actually work on an active resume, active SOP, and that was good enough for my SIP. Also, another important thing about your resume is that please don't try to fake it. This happened in with some of the people who were interviewing alongside me only and who had gotten shortlisted. All of us got quizzed on our resumes, but they were not very clear about the projects that they had mentioned. And that really threw them off, actually, regardless of how well they answered other questions. So I suggest that just put whatever you know very well in your resume, because they will be asking you stuff from whatever you've written. And also mention all the subjects in their order of importance, because that will also give an idea to the interviewers about what all topics have already been covered. So, for example, I remember they had asked me about BJTs, and I told them that I'm not very familiar about it, but they could ask me about MOSFETs. And looking at my resume, they did know that I had a course on microelectronic circuits, but BJT was just touched upon. So they switched, it was not an issue. They switched to MOSFETs, and they asked me similar questions on MOSFETs. Also, another thing about your resume is that please run it through some checkers to like and understand if you have any spelling mistakes and stuff. And I suggest that you refer to some of your seniors' resumes just to get an idea about how a resume should look like, and how formal it should be, and how descriptive it should be. uh, when you talk about projects, yeah, projects are important, and mainly because it gives an idea, as I mentioned before, to the interviewer about how much work you've done in that domain already. The project also can work to your advantage in some cases, because if you have been working on something throughout a semester, you do know a lot about it, and you don't need to put extra effort during your preparation for your SIPs to like go through such topics. And it can also help make the interviewers deviate from your from the normal questions that they ask, and focus on your project, and that does work to your advantage because you do have extensive knowledge about something that you've been working on. So in my case, also, whatever I had done in those 2 months really came handy. Importance of CGPA. So as long as you, for electronics roles, as long as you clear the cutoff, I think for TI it was 6. So that is enough. They for SIPs in particular, I think they do not consider your CG that much. From our previous batches also, they have hired 6 pointers, 7 pointers, even in our batch, I think, and 8 pointers and 9 pointers, obviously. So it is not a very important factor in SIPs. The placement season might be slightly different, but for SIPs, it is not important. Um, now if I talk about my experience, so I have been working here only for 1 week. I joined on 19th, and I have been assigned the role of a validation engineer. So these terms are very new, but and I don't expect any of you to have any idea of what is written on the slide currently. But I just to give you a brief overview, I have to, my most of my work is from the lab, where you basically ensure if devices have the proper power supply, and if and you just like check if the noise levels are um appropriate for your device functioning. So that is what you validate, basically what is happening, and that is why I'm a validation engineer. So thanks. If you have any doubts, you can like put it in the chat box, and or you can like reach out to me personally as well. Yep. Just a minute. Okay.
We'll hold the Q&A session for electronics and consulting combined towards the end of the session. Thank you, Asmita, for your insights. Up next is Arya Agvekar, also headed to TI for an analog design internship. Over to you, Arya.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, yes, you are.
Okay. Just let me know also if my screen is visible.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Hello everyone, I'm Arya Agvekar and currently I'm doing my summer internship in the analog domain at Texas Instruments. Yeah, so let's get started. So what SIP is? SIP is basically your summer internship program. It is something that is organized by the placement unit and most of the companies they come within the first month of your third year. So now the courses that are important. So I'll try to highlight the importance of each of these courses by telling you about the questions that I was asked in my interview as well as the OA. So first up is electronic devices. So you really need to be good with the basics of PN junction, MOSFET structure, breakdown mechanisms, then the IDVG graphs at different values of VD, IDVD graphs at different values of VG, etc. So I think 30 or 40 minutes into my interview, I was asked whether I know my devices well. So I knew that they're going to ask me questions on ED. So I think the interviewer had asked me what avalanche breakdown is, then how it is different from Xena breakdown and stuff like that. So you really need to know the basics of ED well. I would suggest go over the slides that were covered in your 2-1 and that shouldn't take more than 2 or 3 days. And I mean, that's more than enough. Then next up is microelectronic circuits. So it's the most important course I feel for analog in general. So be very thorough with the topologies. So all of us learn what common source, common gate, common drain, and all these topologies are. But you might be asked questions like what even is common gate or why do we need it when we already have common source? So try to reason everything that you've learned in all your courses because the kind of questions that you will be asked in your interviews and OAs, they won't be like midsems and complees. It will test your foundations, your fundamentals. So please try to reason everything that you've learned. Don't just mug up the formulae. Then we have ADVD and TD. I don't think they are that important, but most of my seniors they had advised me to do feedback mechanisms, something that is covered in ADVD. I think for you guys also it will be covered in ADVD. We had done it in MUI itself. And you should also know digital design. Yes, I'm here to speak about analog role, but in my interview, I was asked whether I know Verilog. And although they were planning to ask me, I think, a question about 8-bit adder or something, they were going to ask me to code an 8-bit adder, but we ran out of time, so we never did that. But yes, you should know Verilog as an electronics engineer. Then next up is analog electronics. So this is something that I mean this is a course that you will do in your 3-2. So I would suggest that you take any playlist and cover the basics of inverting, non-inverting, summing, integrating, and differentiating amplifier. So it's more than sufficient even if you just do the topics that I've mentioned over here. And on top of that, if you ask something that you haven't prepared, then you can go ahead and say that this is something that you've not done so far. And then the interviewer will only appreciate the fact that you went out of the way to do stuff on your own. So yeah, that will make a very good impression. Yeah. Next up is electrical sciences. I think this is the most important course from the perspective of SIPs, or I think placements in analog in general. So 80% of the questions in the OA for TI were ES questions. So I would say cover whatever you've learned in your 1-2. But yeah, in my experience, that is just 20 to 30% of the ES that you're required to know for analog placements. So besides that, you have to be very, very thorough with the concepts that are covered in Chambian Sir's YouTube playlist. I've given the link for that over here. So it basically covers a lot in depth about passive devices, something that we just cover in 2 or 3 weeks in our 1-2. So I would say spend a good amount of time doing stuff that is there in this playlist. It really, really helps a lot. It gives you a very good intuition about solving circuits in analog in general. So my interview started itself with a question that I couldn't have solved without this playlist. So the interviewer, he drew an RC circuit in front of me, and then I think the input that he started off by giving was a step voltage. And then I was asked to plot the output voltage waveform and the current waveform for that circuit. Then he changed the input from a step voltage to a ramp voltage. And then he asked me how would the voltage waveform would look like now. So questions like these you will be able to answer intuitively if you go over this playlist. Yeah. Before I start off with interview tips, as was mentioned by Asmita as well, you will also have an aptitude section. So the questions in the aptitude section, they are very fun and easy to solve. But as she mentioned, you have 30 questions and 30 minutes. So time is something that you will have to be very, very careful about. So I would suggest practice a good amount of questions beforehand so that time won't be an issue in your actual OA. Now, coming over to the interview tips, I would say go over interview questions that are normally asked for analog. I've given the link for the resources that I used for SIP prep in general. So there are some playlists there are some playlists that you can go over that will give you an idea about how an interview goes and what all you're supposed to know, how you're supposed to answer the questions. So looking at these mock interviews also helps a lot. And I would say be open and think out loud. This is not your midsem or compre where you're just sitting by yourself and solving a particular question. Imagine that you're sitting in front of your friend and you're literally walking him or her through your approach or how you would have solved that question. It's something like that. And like most of the questions you would be able to answer, but there would be some that might not even have an answer. So the interviewer doesn't expect you to end up with the correct answer as such. He or she just wants to know how you would approach a question that might not even have an answer. So don't be silent while solving questions. Explain your approach thinking and sell your understanding to your level best, because interview is something that's totally in your hand and you can totally ace it. Then lastly, whether the CGPA and projects and stuff like that matters. So I would say CGPA doesn't matter much. Obviously, you'll have to clear the cutoff that the company comes with. But what matters is how well you sell your strengths. So if CGPA is your weakness, then I would say offset or compensate that with projects and an outstanding understanding of the concepts. But with that being said, I didn't have a single project on my resume that was like worthy of being called good. So in that case, I would say don't feel helpless or don't be in a dilemma. Ki now what will you do? There's just 2 months. It's okay even if you don't have a good project. It's okay even if you don't have a good CGPA. All of that can be outweighed and compensated by an excellent understanding of the concepts that you have been studying. So don't worry too much. And I would say that you can also do certain projects on Udemy and Coursera. Like I had coded a 32-bit processor as a part of one course that is available on Udemy. So try and explore such things also. Don't feel helpless at any point of time. Yeah, so that is it from my side. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I have given my number on the first slide itself. Yeah.
Thank you for your incredible insights, Arya.
Our third speaker is A. Rameshwar Patro, who landed an digital design role at TI. Over to you, Rameshwar.
Hello guys, am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, so I didn't get much time to prepare a formal presentation, but I'll be sharing the resources and I would be speaking about what you should do. Okay, so I would like to begin with how where Arya ended. So my CGPA was 7.5. I didn't have any projects related to electronics domain. Neither was my PS1 in an electronics domain, and my resume was, I guess, half a page. And so like CGPA does matter to clear the cutoff, but despite having a lower CGPA, yes, you can land an internship. So for me, I think the most important thing that I would say is clarity of concepts. And by clarity of concept, I mean that you should not only understand like what a thing does, but you should also understand why the thing does what it does. And there is a few things that I would like to add up to what others said. Like as in interviewing tips, if you don't know something and if you are guesstimating or if you are thinking it might happen like how you assume it to be, then do let the interviewer know that you think it is gonna go that way, but it's not what you know, so that the interviewer is aware that you're just trying to reach a way out. For things that you should prepare is yes, DD like have a really small grasp of static timing analysis and compare, and you should be very well aware of CMOS, how it works, and its like IR characteristics. And if you ask about if you want to know about like like how the OA the interview goes, since I didn't have any formal project, so my interview was for 1 hour 40 minutes, and it like the interviewer didn't even ask my name. There were three interviews, and the questions were really conceptual, and they like judged me how I approached the question rather than whether I ended up in the right answer or not. Like one of the questions was like do a 3:1 mux, and then the questions were related. The following questions were related to it, like make NOR 3:1 NOR get using 3:1 mux, and what happens if you give the select lines as 1:1 in a 3:1. So I would like want you all to be like really clear with your concepts. And regarding where to study, I think it doesn't much matter from where you study, because like when you have the clarity of concept, I think most of the YouTube channels or the what teacher had taught, I think Anita ma'am had taught us, and her slides were good enough to get a grasp of what all you have to do. And in DD, the part after the midsem, the memory part, was only relevant during the OA session, but for interviews, they mostly focused on the pre-midsem and CMOS and static timing analysis. And for Verilog, I would strongly ask you to do by Xilinx Vivado, because it lets you know the schematic of whatever you're coding, and also you know the flow of the implementation stage. I think that's all, and I would share all the resources in, a, in a little later time.
Thank you for your insights, Rameshwar.
Rounding off, we have Arnav Jain, who grabbed an opportunity at NVIDIA, known for its cutting edge work in both hardware and software domains. Over to you, Arnav.
I'm audible, right?
Yes, yes.
Just 1 second, I'll just share the presentation. Just 1 second, I just have to enter some passwords. Uh, I have some issues sharing the presentation, but I'll just go through whatever points I've prepared in that. Uh, so basically, I'll just introduce myself. So I'm a third year electronics and communication engineer. Now I'm in fourth year. My CGPA was 8.52 when I sat for my SIP role, and so for relevant courses, I think digital design would be a very important point to start with. So your digital design concept should be very clear. Like you should be very good with the basics. And For other courses, I think microelectronics is also important because like during my interviews, they asked me to like explain what a differential amplifier is, and like they asked me to make a transfer characteristics for a inverter. So you should be very clear with microelectronics. Also, what you can do is you can see Abhijit Pethes sir YouTube playlist on analog digital wireless design. So you can just go through the very initial videos and like understand what all he was talking about. Other than that, I think microprocessors is not important as such. Like nobody asked us any questions regarding MUPI. You should do STA. STA was like it was not asked in our batch, but previously it was asked very much. So you should be good with STA. For Verilog, you should be good in Verilog, and like go through some Udemy course or something. I would prefer they will get a clear understanding about Verilog. And computer architecture, for Nvidia, it's important. They used to ask questions related to that. They didn't ask for me, but they used to. And then other than that, I would say ADVD is also important, but I don't think for now it's for digital role is that important, but for analog, a little bit of feedback mechanism and all would be like helpful. And something that would be really good is like you do some basic coding. So like even in our OA, there was an linked list question. So you should be clear with some basic data structures. And my interview hasn't had an hash map question. So we should know how to code at least in C or C++, and like have a basic understanding of like 2 3 data structures like linked list, hash maps, and like go through STL in C. Uh, Other than that, I'd say you should start making your resume right now, because resumes takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of iterations to cover through, and if you like start at the very end, you won't be able to make your resume. So you should see what your strengths are and you should lay them accordingly. Also, try to gather all your projects together, like whatever you did any projects, or try to do it over the summer. Also, I would say display your PS1 very nicely, because if you're doing a core thing, it's the only relevant experience you have in the industry. So if you have a core PS1, try to like elaborate much on it. uh, for the interviews, I would say the interview, you should be out loud and you should like speak as you do your work. You shouldn't just try to solve it and not convey like how you're trying to solve it. Like I would not say just sit there and just solve it and not tell the interviewer what you're thinking. Just say you're thinking out loud. And if you don't know anything, just I would say don't waste the interviewer's time by coming up with a solution that you don't know. Explain to him that you're not aware of the topic, and that you're thinking in this way, but mostly it is wrong. And it would be better like if we move to the next question or something. And other than that, there's nothing much. I had one resources thing, but right now I'm not able to share that. Maybe someone from CT could share my slides with you all, and you can see the resources in that. That's all.
Thank you for your incredible insight, Arnav. We'll now open the floor for the consulting and electronics Q&A session. Feel free to ask about anything to our speakers.
Also, yeah, I wanted to add one more thing that for NVIDIA, you need require an CGPA of 8 plus. And for Texas, there's nothing as such. And I think for Google hardware, it was some 7 plus criteria.
The first question coming up here for electronics score, both analog and digital, is what is the one mistake that juniors must avoid at all costs?
I think most people just focus on preparing for the online exam instead of the interview. But as I mentioned before, like both of them require completely different preparations. One requires intuitive understanding and one requires mathematical accuracy. So, and you wouldn't have much time for to prepare for the interview once you get selected. So I suggest ki you prepare both of them simultaneously.
Also, one
Also,
thing that Asmita said was like you should also prepare for your aptitude really nicely because aptitude can hold you back. Even in our NVIDIA OA, the aptitude was really hard. So you should go through aptitude really nicely. And for Texas, your speed really matters. So yeah, go through CAT questions or something like CAT questions to like get better at aptitude.
Thank you for
also,
your inputs. Oh, yes, go ahead, go ahead.
also to the speakers, what would you say that really helped you stand out in the interviews? Anyone?
I would say like you should explain what you are thinking clearly. Like you should not sit idle again and uh, like try to think, come up with a solution. And for me, my PS1 project was really like they asked me some questions about it, and also like I had done some computer architecture, so they really appreciated that like in the interview.
For me, I did a course called New Venture Creation. I believe it was offered for you guys as well, in which we had to create or formulate a startup. And we went through certain stages about how we start an elevator pitch or how do we do a product market fit and whatnot. So there was a thing of co-founder tag in my resume. And while the interview was going on, okay, so in the case interview, the first 5 to 10 minutes are basically your introduction and your profile and everything, and then your actual case begins. So during the first 5 to 10 minutes, the interviewer found that co-founder tag very interesting, and we had a discussion about that startup, about what it was, what learning should I have, why did it not work out, and that sort of stuff. So, and as I mentioned, that you just need that one spike or let's say one area where you can demonstrate that you can get things done and you can take some leadership or whatever you want to do, and that might make you stand out in the interview process for consulting at least.
Thank you for your input. The next question caters more to the consulting side of things. And the question is, what is the importance of connections?
Connections as in industry connections, if I'm understanding it correctly.
Yeah, industry connections, alumni connections, in whatever way you can interpret it.
Okay. So, okay, speaking in an official meeting tone, the connections won't help you as per say in on-campus interview process because you apply through Superset and everything goes through the official college Superset domain only. But yes, if you know people who are working in the industry or in the same companies, that can help you get referrals in an off-campus role. I know a couple of friends from other colleges who had some connects or some, let's say, a network basically, which help them get an off-campus internship. But if you're speaking truly in on-campus sort of manner, that won't help you much because everything goes to superset domain and every profile and everything you mention or do is verified by PU or PhD. But yes, in an off-campus setting, it do helps you a lot, a lot.
That brings us to the end
Okay,
of
just yeah, just
yeah.
just just clarifying. Connects do not mean that you message random seniors that, hey, I want to get into the company. Could you please give me a referral? That is one way, but the connects I mean is that you personally know or in some capacity know the person well so that they can help you get an internship. Just messaging, cold messaging random people might land you 1 in 100 shot, but that is not considered a network or connects as per se. Yeah, that was all from me.
Yeah, thanks for your insights. That brings us to the end of today's SIP talk. A huge thank to all our speakers, Devansh, Ashmita, Rameshwar, Arnav, and Arya, for sharing their journey, insights, and advice. We hope this session gave you a clear picture of what it takes to excel in consulting and core electronics. Thanks again for being a wonderful audience, and all the best for your SIP journey ahead.
We'll share all the important slides related to today's presentations in the respective groups.